conclude that Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer represent something other than progress. If Congress continues to behave as contemptibly as it has in recent years and weeks, it will by default allow the conditions that have produced Trump and his cronies to prevail. So it's time to take another stab at an approach to governance worthy of a democratic republic. Where to begin? I submit that Robert Angstrom, his question, offers a place to start. What's the point of being an American? Now, there are many ways of answering Rabbit's query. My own answer is rooted in an abiding conviction that our problems are less quantitative than qualitative. Rather than simply more, yet more wealth, more freedom, more attempts at bending the global order to suit our preferences, the times call for different. In my view, the point of being an American is to participate in creating a society that strikes a balance between wants and needs, that exists in harmony with nature and the rest of humankind, and that is rooted in an agreed-upon conception of the common good. That last, a phrase from my youth that has all but disappeared from political discourse. Now, people of goodwill are likely to differ on how to fulfill such aspirations, but therein lies the basis for an interesting debate, one that is essential to prospects of stemming the accelerating decay of American civil life. Yet the real beginning of wisdom, I submit, lies in recognizing that Trump is not cause but consequence. A post-Cold War consensus that promoted transnational corporate greed, mistook libertinism for liberty, and embraced militarized neo-imperialism as the essence of enlightened statecraft, created the conditions that handed Trump the presidency. When he finally leaves office, whatever the circumstances, many Americans will celebrate, much as they celebrated the fall of the Berlin Wall just over a quarter century ago. But as was the case back then, the real question is this one: what should come next? In that instance, the answers we embraced, informed by an extraordinary bout of hubris, were deeply defective. Perhaps next time around, chastened by the events of the recent past, we may be able to do at least slightly better. Thank you. So we want to be out of here by about 6:15, thereabouts, which means we've got about 25 minutes to go. Although if you don't want to ask questions, then we'll leave early and hit the bar. But if you'll raise your hand, I will try to point to you, and anybody who wants to begin can begin. Except for the person whose phone is going on. Yes, sir.
I agree with you that he inherited a lot of problems. He inherited the wrong war in Iraq, and as you said, many people have been killed without reason. And this is a sin that the few can forgive. But on the other hand, Trump is ruling the country as his own business, family estate business. And I hope that many Americans will find this intolerable and ask for a change.
It wasn't exactly a question, it was a comment. And the comment was that Trump's been running the country like a family business. And the gentleman hopes that the American people will figure this out and replace him. Is that a fair summary? Yeah. To which I say, I agree. But where we may disagree is we're not going to be out of the woods then. You know, or to make the argument another way, it's my conviction, many of you disagree with this, that had Hillary Clinton been elected, we'd still be in a fix. We'd still have an approach to political economy based on neoliberal precepts, the expectation that creating a wide open world for capitalism is going to benefit everybody. That's what she believes. We'd still have an emphasis on a definition of freedom designed in terms of removing obstacles and barriers and avoiding a conversation about, well, what should freedom actually entail? And certain, if we had a President Hillary Clinton, there wouldn't even have been any discussion about pulling out of Afghanistan or pulling out of Syria. So I am all for Mr. Trump leaving office, and the sooner the better. But the burden of my argument, and what I'm inviting you to think about, is that we'd still be in quite a fix. And only if, in my judgment, only if we are able to recognize the influence of what I've called this post-war consensus in shaping policy. Only if we come to realize the defects of that consensus and the need to move beyond that consensus, only then, I think, can we find our way out of this crisis. Yes, sir.
Yeah, somewhat of a disagreement. I think that globalization in general has done far more good than bad. However, it's done it more on a global scale. It's certainly raised the income of tens, if not hundreds of billions of people around the world, but it hasn't always worked so well here. I would say that globalization is a very good thing, but having plowed through about 1,200 pages of Thomas Piketty, I think he's right, and that the people who say, you know, we need a wealth tax, things of that sort, to bring things into balance works a lot better than trying to put the genie back in the bottle. That's not going to happen.
So, the argument is that globalization is not so bad after all. It's produced a number of positive benefits, particularly in places other than the United States. I agree. Perhaps, if we had a really enlightened public, we would elect presidents and members of Congress based on what their programs were going to do for people who weren't Americans. We'd elect a president based on the president saying, yes, I can bring prosperity to Central America. I can bring prosperity to Sub-Saharan Africa. But as a practical matter, that's not how we choose our leaders. We choose our leaders based on the basic question is, what are you going to do for us, the American people? And my argument is that the post-Cold War consensus worked for some Americans, but worked to the detriment of so many Americans that they rejected the premises of that consensus in the election of 2016. So we need a different consensus. I'm not against prosperity coming to the People's Republic of China. I am against, we have 3 Americans who control half the wealth of this country. 3. There's Buffett, Gates, and the social media guy. Right? So 3 people control half the wealth of this country. That's wrong. Okay? That's wrong. I can't recite the statistics off the top of my head. They're in my new book, which comes out in January. Write that down. But I mean, if you are a person of color, your retirement savings on average are essentially zero. Zero. People being victimized by neoliberalism. So I think we have to rethink our approach to policy in ways that do respond to the well-being of the American people, and if we get that right, then maybe we can worry about the well-being of others beyond our borders. That'd be my view. Yes, sir, there.
I was impressed by the title of your 2010 book, which is Washington Rules, America's Path to Permanent War. And when I saw that, I wondered how you felt, having studied this, about our effect in the Middle East, our effect of those wars to the issues that the Middle East is facing.
Well, you do not mean this in an argumentative sense?
No, I'm just
But you are
really
falling
asking
behind.
your
You're falling
question.
behind in your reading.
I'm asking
You need to read my 2016 book.
Back up.
You need to read my 2016 book, which is called, write this down, America's War for the Greater Middle East, a military history. Now, this is a narrative history told strictly from the point of view of the United States, what the United States has been trying to do with its military power in the Greater Middle East since the promulgation of the Carter Doctrine back in 1979, down to 2016 when the book was done. So this is my effort to say, okay, we have been employing our military power aggressively, comprehensively, over a long period of time. How's it worked out? And the book provides one person's answer, and the answer is, it's cost us one whole hell of a lot. It has made things worse. Again, it's one of these things that puzzles me. There's a research program at Brown called the Cost of War Project. You should look it up. They have been measuring the cost of our wars in the Middle East through a variety of metrics. And they calculate the total cost of our Middle East wars. I think they started actually counting in 9/11. I think they should have started counting earlier. Is presently something in the order of $6 trillion. That's not $6 trillion already spent. It's $6 trillion that will have been spent by the time the last disabled veteran of these wars is no longer collecting a disability check. $6 trillion. And we got what? My estimation, we got next to nothing. And what frankly just bothers the heck out of me is that this is like a back burner issue. You know? I only made it through about the first 45 minutes of the first Democratic debate before I abandoned ship. But in general, it does not seem to me that the failure of our Middle East wars is something of much concern in this race. Now, I think Tulsi Gabbard would be an exception. She is pretty passionate about getting out of our wars. I think Elizabeth Warren is a critic of those wars, but I don't know that any of them are saying, elect me president because I'm the one who realizes that our our military policies in the Greater Middle East have been broken for decades now. It doesn't tend to get talked about. But I commend my 2016 book. You probably could find it in the library, but you'd be much happier, I think, if you actually bought it.
I promise I shall.
Okay. Is that I can't see the young person. Is it a young person?
Yeah, I did.
You are a young person.
they have never gotten rid of Iran. He's still there. So I think that the techniques of fascism that he used, they came from Mussolini and other countries. He studied in Nazi Germany, and I could predict what things would happen because of Iran. I mean, it's very interesting.
So, let me press you. Are you saying that what happened in Argentina is happening in the United States of America today? Well, I think this is a pretty widespread view. I just disagree. And what's the basis of my disagreement? My disagreement, if indeed one expression of fascism is to suppress freedom of speech and the free press, I must say, I see no evidence of that happening in our country. I see a president on a daily basis denouncing the press, mocking the press. I have not seen any significant evidence of the press being cowed as a result of that. As a matter of fact, it seems to me, particularly in the times, the Post, MSNBC, CNN, they're having the time of their lives, right? Going after the president and probably making a considerable amount of money doing it. So I understand your concern. I just don't think that what we see happening in our country suggests that that's...
But don't you think the journalists are afraid?
Do I think what? I'm sorry?
They are afraid. The journalists in this country are afraid.
Who's afraid?
The journalists.
No, ma'am, I do not. She says, do I think that journalists are afraid? No, I do not think that journalists are afraid.
Money, but the people are not expressing themselves as they should.
We're reading different things, we're watching different programs. I just don't see that. Matter of fact, again, this is sort of one of the themes of my talk. My problem is they obsess about Trump so much that the larger concerns I was trying to describe for you go more or less unnoticed. I mean, if you turn on, what's the guy, MSNBC, Chris Matthews. I watch him once every 2 weeks. I watch Chris Matthews for about 6 minutes. And all he does is denounce President Trump. It's good business. Now, granted, you can flip over to Fox and watch those people, and all they do is denounce the people who denounce President Trump. Not a heck of a lot of civic education going on here. But again, and we're just going to disagree, I just don't think that the press has been cowed in any significant way. And I celebrate that. I just wish that they would sort of get over their preoccupation with Trump, at least to some degree, and give greater attention to some of these other matters that I was trying to point out in my talk. Not give them a free ride, not ignore them. Let's talk about our wars that never end. Let's talk about inequality. Let's talk about the epidemic of dysfunction in our country at a time when, by any measure, we are freer than we ever have been in the course of our history together. That's what needs to be talked about. Yes, sir.
Foreign policy question. Why, given your analysis, it seems to me to be spot on, and I'm sure many in the military share your point of view, why is it so difficult to arrive at a consensus, for example, to withdraw from Afghanistan? Or even to talk about it?
Well, let's be clear. There are negotiations. Why is it so hard to talk about getting out of Afghanistan? First of all, there are negotiations underway. Don't get a heck of a lot of press attention. The chief negotiator on our side is Zalmay Khalilzad, who was U.S. ambassador to Afghanistan, among other posts. He is trying to preside over talks between the Taliban, bad guys, and the government of Afghanistan that we have created and are supposedly trying to support. my expectation, which may prove to be totally wrong, is that basically we're going to sell out the Afghans just as we sold out the South Vietnamese back in the 1970s. Because the Trump administration does want to get the hell out of Afghanistan. And at the end of the day, that's what will, I think, prevail. But that was not the core question.
Well,
Again, on the military,
The military.
you suggested that the military wants to get out. Please understand that I've been out of the Army now longer than I was in it. It's not like I'm exchanging emails with the Army Chief of Staff. But I do have a general perception that the senior officials in what we might call the national security apparatus, the uniformed services, defense contractors, certain think tanks, all the little 20-somethings that hope to grow up someday to be the Assistant Secretary of Defense for East Asia or whatever. That crowd of people, the national security elite, but it includes the senior military, they are deeply invested in the national security status quo. That is to say, they are deeply invested in the notion that we're going to spend more money on our military than the next 6, 7, 8 biggest spending countries in the world. They're deeply invested in the fact that we've got over 800 bases scattered around the world. They're deeply invested, my numbers are going to be off just a tiny bit, that in the last year, U.S. military special operations forces have been active in something like 150 different countries. They're deeply invested in perpetuating those arrangements. And therefore, they're not inclined to think critically about Afghanistan. They're not inclined to say, hey, wait a second. This constitutes a policy failure. It constitutes a policy failure that we who are leaders of the Army, the Navy, and the Marine Corps, that we who are senior officials in the Pentagon, that we need to confront and assess and fix responsibility and figure out how we're going to avoid. And they're not thinking about that. They want Trump perceived to be an isolationist. He's not. Under Trump, the military budget keeps going up. Keeps going up. Why does it keep going up? It keeps going up because that robust and increasing military spending serves the interests of various individuals and various groups. In the back.
How do you stop that? We're talking about entrenched power in various aspects, political, military, Wall Street, etc., etc.
You listen to me. The question is, how do you stop that? Well, let me give you a slightly less smart-alecky answer. I believe, I'm not sure why I believe this, but I believe that conditions are evolving such that it may be possible to promote a critical conversation, evaluation of U.S. national security policy since the end of the Cold War. That there is an awareness in some quarters, not necessarily where the 4-star generals and admirals get together for lunch in the Pentagon, but there is an awareness in some quarters that there's been something basically wrong with the way we have used our power since the end of the Cold War. So what's necessary is to try to nurture that perception. And that's why, so here's a commercial, that's why I'm personally involved in creating a new think tank. You didn't know we needed another think tank in Washington. It's a new think tank in Washington called the Quincy Institute. The Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. And we're just standing up. We're just kind of trying to get our sea legs. we may accomplish nothing. If we do accomplish something, it's probably going to take a decade to change the conversation. What do we believe in? We believe in ending endless wars. We believe in coming to a more prudent understanding of what force can do and shouldn't be required to do. We believe in dialogue. Dialogue with who? Oh, dialogue with Iran. Dialogue with the People's Republic of China. So we want to try to change the conversation. And, you know, it costs a lot of money to do this. If any of you would like to write a check for $250,000, I promise that I will cash it by noon tomorrow. But we're just getting ourselves organized. And it's Quincy Institute after John Quincy Adams.
Yes.
Kind of our sort of motto, as it were, or inspirational quote is from his July 4th, 1821 speech, where he warned against, this is close to a quote, going abroad in search of monsters to destroy. That were America to do that, he said in 1821, we would find ourselves embroiled beyond extrication in matters that are not our concern, and that will end up compromising our own freedom. So, you know, look for us. So the people are already walking out on me. So I take that as a hint to say, let's do one more question, and then we'll go ahead and adjourn. Yes?
I'm sitting here thinking that we as a society have dysfunction in some of our families, we have dysfunction in our country, and there's dysfunction in the world. The only thing, it's almost like we have to enter a family barrier in the world that we will begin to work together to figure out ways to strengthen and improve. But the one caveat that always comes back to me with all of these that happen is every culture, the Soviet, every country is Soviet, religion is Soviet, and much of the stuff that we're involved in fighting has to do with extremely different viewpoints, very basic things from Americans and Turkey. How does it work? Any ideas on how it works that way?
So I think your question comes down to, it's a really diverse and complicated world, and what can we do to try to promote a little bit of harmony? So I'm a Catholic, so I believe in original sin. I'm not joking. I believe that there is something about the human species that warns us against, should warn us against, expectations of permanent peace, should warn us against utopian projects. We are condemned to live in a sinful world. One of the problems with the post-Cold War consensus, it was informed by an arrogant conviction that at the end of history, everybody was kind of going to coalesce around the way we do things. That was a radically false expectation. So what can we do? I think we need to be realistic about what the world looks like, how it works. We need to use our power prudently. First of all, I guess this is the motto of the medical profession. First of all, do no harm.
Yes.
And then and then to make a difference where we can. Now, what might that mean in practical terms? Bush administration believed that by overthrowing Saddam Hussein, we would quickly convert Iraq into a liberal democracy that would be aligned with the West.
It was Bush.
Didn't I say Bush?
Yeah.
Oh, Bush.
Yeah.
Bush. We're on the same team. Further believed that once we had demonstrated our capacity to convert Iraq into a democracy, that soon thereafter, this would Soon thereafter,
Leave it.
something similar would follow elsewhere in the region. And what we did was to create a humongous mess. So we need to define our purposes more modestly, I think. Right now, a lot of attention, rightly so, on the immigration crisis along the southern border. We're putting people in what are concentration camps for all practical purposes. I mean, it's almost unbelievable. Well, why are these people coming to our country? Because they seek refuge. They seek refuge from awful conditions, where they are poor, where there's widespread criminality, in some rather tiny little countries. Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, thank you very much, Honduras. Well, why not, they happen to be in our own hemisphere, by the way, why not see what we can do to alleviate those conditions? Which will be a challenging project, but to the extent that we can succeed, would actually be good for our country as well. So it's not a counsel, mine is not a counsel of despair and inaction, but of modesty, engaging what we are able to do. And then a willingness to sort of stick with it, because it's going to take a while to fix things. So thank you very much.